Hi everybody, I'm Barry Hirshorn. I have spent 30 years in earthquakes and tsunami warning. I was with the USGS Earthquake Hazards Program for 10 years, real-time earthquake monitoring, and the beginnings of earthquake early warning. And I spent 20 years at the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Hawaii as a duty scientist and as a person who was bringing in scientific advances in seismology into the warning system that could save lives, to do with things like the size of the earthquake and so forth, and how fast and how quickly we can get those to the closest coast and save the most lives. That's where I am now. That's what I've been specializing on, and I'm still working on that sort of stuff. Now I'm going to kind of switch gears, and I'm going to mention something we like to call the three-legged stool. From a non-technical viewpoint, from a critical non-technical viewpoint, most of us, I just learned this recently, that most stools will only stand if all three legs are working. If any one of the three legs breaks, stool goes over. The same thing holds for a tsunami warning system as opposed to tsunami warning center. Remember, a seismic warning system, as we have in the Pacific Ocean now, and in many places, involves the warning centers who provide a warning, the actual warning. They apply all the science, and they can tell you with increasing accuracy and speed where, how big, how dangerous, what sort of tsunami to affect. The civil defense folks are the second leg of the stool. They're between us and the population in general, although we do put out broad-based warnings for everybody. They're the folks who will sound the sirens, mobilize all the various facilities needed to protect people during and after, hopefully more during and less after. And then just essentially mobilize all of society's responses to the potential, the short fuse potential of the tsunami. And then there's the third leg, which is all of us, and which again centers on my starting message from Emil, which is understand the hazard. And there's a number of strong beforehand lessons you can take from that. But I'll start with some of the ways we know these lessons, and I'll use Japan as an example, the Tohoku quake. To start with, Tohoku earthquake on 24, let me get my numbers right here. The Tohoku earthquake, we lost 25,000 people died. In addition, the disaster itself destroyed much of their medical system. About 40% of their coast was surrounded by seawalls, but not walls able to take the tsunami from magnitude 9. They expected a much smaller event. And that also prompted a seismological revolution to deal with that for the future, which we're able to do now. Not with the seawalls, but with knowing it'll be that big. And because of that same problem of underestimating the threat, the evacuation areas were not sufficiently high or far inland, and many people didn't survive who even went to those. So basically, that's a little grim, but basically just to say that what you know ahead of time in terms of I'll repeat, if you get a natural warning, you want to go as far inland and uphill as possible, whichever gets you the most uphill. And you want to, hopefully you can do that with a natural warning from the ground shaking. If you don't, immediately heed the actual warning that will come very quickly now, much more quickly than before, from the warning centers. And then the other thing is to have some preparation ahead of time for what you'll do in the aftermath. And you will have to survive with essentially no infrastructure depending on the severity of the disaster and the degree of preparedness of the civil defense folks and others, for anywhere from weeks to even as long as a month. So be ready with the usual things like water, food that you need as opposed to food that you want, and maybe a gallon a day of water so that you can mostly drink and minimal wash. Anyway, I guess I'll just end with that. And the other thing I'll finish off with is that try a little, if you're interested, to understand some of the reasons why and how some of these things occur, because without going too deeply into that will cue you in specifically what you notice and what you know will combine to prepare you to do the right thing.